Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? A French thief who spent 10 years in prison became a comedian when he got out. One of his stories. Finds a building. Goes in. Chooses a floor and transforms the exit door into an extra apartment. Puts the apartment number. Fake lock. Welcome rug. Etc. Puts an iPhone for sale. The person comes to buy it. He opens the door in a shower robe and says, "Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna count the money." And poof. He's gone from the exit stairs. A friend of my brother moved to Israel where for a period of time it was acceptable to drive with an American driver's license. He was pulled over for speeding. And when asked for his license, gave the officer his Costco card. Costco is a membership-based retail warehouse in the US and a few other countries. The exchange apparently went something like this. Officer. Costco? What is Costco? Friend. It's the state I'm from. Officer. That sounds made up. Friend. There are lots of states you probably haven't heard of. Have you heard of Arkansas? How about Idaho? Officer. I guess not. Friend. Well, I'm from the small state of Costco. The officer didn't have a response and wound up writing the ticket to someone with a Costco driver's license. Friend framed the ticket and still has it hanging on his wall. One guy would print barcodes. Bring them into Home Depot and stick them on merchandise in the $100 range. When scanned, the items came up around the $10 range. Putting random barcodes on things isn't really illegal and super hard to notice. Guy 2 would come in an hour later and buy the underpriced stuff. Complete plausible deniability. They would then sell the stuff on eBay. Only reason they got caught is because the guy with the barcode printer software cut the second guy out of the operation, so guy 2 stole a bunch of barcodes. Put them on the merchandise and paid for it immediately afterwards. He then proceeded to rat on the first guy and spilled the beans. They had been doing this on a weekly basis for over 4 years. Because we could only pin the one case on him. The burglary was dropped down to a petty theft and he walked away with a few days in county and a small fine. Dude probably took home the pot for tens of thousands over the years. Probably someone who committed a crime I never solved. With that being said, I had a guy use a sledgehammer to smash his way through a wall at a Best Buy and steal a bunch of phones and cameras. He was smart enough to wear gloves and a face mask and not touch anything he didn't have to. Alarms didn't go off until he exited out the back door. Which the alarm company gets after a minute or two and takes them like 3-4 minutes to call into us. Giving him a good 5-minute head start, so he was probably a few miles away before we got dispatched to it. He clearly scoped out the area before doing his deed too. Smart dude. It. So part of the building was built into a hill. So the hole was on the back side of the building along the grade line, but when you're inside the building it was about 8 feet up. So it was easier for him to leave out a door. Also, the wall section where he broke through was hollow cement block. The portion of the wall below that was poured concrete. Same thing as the computer rooms. Guys would cut the power to electrical stations, damage the wiring, then hide waiting for the cops to show up. Once the owners of the buildings came, they would shut off the power because of the unsafe wiring that would have to be repaired in the morning. Everyone would leave for the night. And then would cut away all the non-powered wiring to get the copper removed. Not a policeman here. But I have a nice story from insurance debt collectors. There was this guy who was already in heaps of debt. Like more than a lifetime's worth of debt. He proceeded to file several policy reports for identity theft up to the point that he got protected from financial checkups. It was a temporary measure that were given to repeated identity theft victims. At the same time, he had reported fake income to the IRS for the last couple of years to between 40 to 60 millions depending on the year. So when he applied for credit cards and loans, they were unable to check his financial credit due to the identity theft protection, but they checked his tax returns, which showed he had a massive income. Got his loans and credit cards, emptied them out and left the country. Not a cop. And wouldn't call this the smartest thing ever. But it was pretty amusing and clever. A while back, There was a series of thefts along the bus lines in my country. People's things kept missing from one city to the next. And nobody had any idea what happened, as things were presumably safe in the bottom of the bus, which nobody except the driver had the access to. What happened? Apparently there were two guys. One of whom was really small. You get where this is going. The big guy would put the little guy in a suitcase, buy a ticket to somewhere, load him up with the rest of the luggage, and enjoy the ride. While the little guy went out, stole people's electronics, jewelry, cameras and whatnot, then returned to his suitcase until the ride was over. Not really sure how they caught them, but it was pretty amusing to read about. And I found the whole thing clever enough. I remember getting into a festival and seeing a magician guy do tricks on the people searching him to distract them from the drugs he had on him. Spectacular show. And I'm sure he made good profit. If the police officers knew, they'd be talking about it on here. But I doubt it. Not a police officer, but I once dealt with a criminal who forged court documents facilitating his own release from prison. Edit. Whoa. My first silver. Thank you. Kind stranger. Edit. Oh my goodness. Thank you for the gold. My first silver and my first gold in one day. Homeless guy in my hometown figured out if he committed some act of petty theft he'd get a night in jail, a warm place to sleep and a hot meal. He'd show up, turn in his stolen goods, and that would be that. After a while the police would just tell him to take back whatever he stole the next day. Quite the town character. Possible urban myth, but I like it. Somewhere in England there was this car park outside a local tourist attraction. Because it was city land, a booth was set up to collect parking fees. It cost something like $5 pounds euros to park. The old man collecting the fees was a pleasant chap. Never missed a day of work in 10 years. Rain or shine. One day the tourist attraction hears there is nobody manning the booth. Because it is a city-owned lot. They call the city to ask where the parking attendant is. The city says, "What parking attendant?" Old man was never heard or seen again. He built the booth himself and manned it for 10 years. Not a policeman, but several years ago in Cape Coral, FL. A man waited on a sidewalk in front of a Publix grocery store and used a taser on an armored car guard carrying 2 bags of money. A getaway driver in a car with stolen tags pulled up. Taser guy and money bags get in and they took off. Never caught. When I first moved to the area in the 90s, a man robbed a bank, jumped on a bicycle that he rode down a footpath through some woods, where he had left a boat on a waterway. Never caught. I remember some thieves would go and trigger the alarm of a vacant Blockbuster after they all started closing down. They did this for 2 weeks straight. So I guess the cops became convinced that this was a false alarm going off at the exact same time every night, so they stopped rushing to investigate. One day we find out that the pharmacy next to the Blockbuster was broken into through the wall they shared. Not only that, but there was only one tiny section of the wall that wasn't covered in shelves and panels in the pharmacy. So the thieves had to know exactly which part of the Blockbuster wall to break through. Still pretty impressed by the heist these junkies managed to pull off. I have a friend who is no longer a criminal but committed crimes for about 15 years and never got arrested or even investigated. Some of his highlights: growing weed in a shed on his neighbor's property. The neighbor was old and never left the house. Buying a building under a fake name. Taking out huge loans against it. Getting HUD money. And burning it all down. Sold fake raffle tickets to raffle off stuff he never had and never raffled. I can't remember how many times he pulled that scam, but he bought a new car with the money. He moved a bunch of times because people would suspect him of being a con man. His dad was in jail for similar stuff. But he was never even questioned by the police about anything. Now he has a family and a normal job. Semicolon. 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 Comma, now he has a family and a normal job. Semicolon. His finest con yet. Semicolon. Edit. Thank you for my silver. Stranger. I am grateful for all of the fake internet points. Not a cop. We got called for a rollover car accident. We get there and the car is empty, so we think he got ejected. My partner and I start looking for a body nearby. A few minutes later a cop tells us that they think the driver is a mile down the road walking. We go check on him and he tells us he's fine but he wasn't driving the car. He also didn't know who was driving the car. And he had clearly been drinking. During the ride to the ER, he told me that as long as the cops don't find you in the car, the local DA won't pursue drunk driving charges. All you had to do was get out of the car and walk away from it.